Welcome to this week's edition of On the Record. We begin in Jefferson City, where the Missouri Democratic Party says they are officially against Amendment 5. The Missouri Democrats announced their state committee voted unanimously to endorse a no vote on the proposed constitutional amendment on the state's income tax. In a statement, party chair and former Democrat Congressman Russ Carnahan said, quote, Missourians will not be tricked into paying more taxes by a race car commercial or an underbaked plan. End quote. Democrats also say they have a record number of Democratic candidates running in state and federal races around the state. Some of the closest watched Democrat races on the August ballot include primary elections for county executive in Jackson and St. Louis counties, as well as a handful of open state, House, and Senate seats. The U.S. Supreme Court makes a major ruling with significant ties to the Show Me State. The nation's high court ruled Thursday that states like Missouri cannot require a company like Bayer to put warning labels on the product Roundup. In the 7-2 decision, the justices ruled federal law already requires the company to use labeling approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The Supreme Court's decision also overturned a multi-million-dollar judgment awarded by a Missouri court to a man who said he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after years of exposure to the widely used weed killer. The original lawsuit involved Missouri-based Monsanto, which was acquired by Bayer in 2018. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the court's opinion, which in part says Monsanto legally must use a label without a cancer warning unless and until EPA approves or requires a change. The announcement is expected to have a ripple effect on thousands of other lawsuits against the product. The Supreme Court also ruled against a Hawaii law requiring people to get permission to bring guns to places like hotels and stores. The 6-3 ruling is a win for the Trump administration, which argued the law violates the Second Amendment. News Nation Washington correspondent Maddie Beertemple reports on reaction to the ruling.
In a win for gun rights advocates, the Supreme Court struck down a Hawaii gun law. It banned bringing guns to private property like stores without the owner's permission.
If a gun owner was carrying a firearm and decided to say stop at a gas station or a supermarket, they now had to make this figure out whether or not they could affirmatively enter the property versus simply just, entering the property.
Adam Kraut with the Second Amendment Foundation praised the majority's opinion that said Hawaii's law, quote, hobbles what the Second Amendment protects, the right of Americans to carry arms for self-defense as they go about their daily lives.
The court also wrote the law burdens businesses, saying they'd basically have to put up guns welcome signs, which they may not want to do.
Businesses shouldn't be in the business of, alienating potential customers.
What's not taken into account here in the decision whatsoever is the modern impact of gun violence in our country.
Brady United Against Gun Violence President Chris Brown says the ruling puts guns over people and doesn't respect the property owners.
It is fundamental in U.S. law the rights of property owners to exclude.
Businesses can still post signs banning guns on their property, but Brown says that's a burden. She agrees with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who wrote Hawaii's law
does no harm to the Second Amendment.
This was the second of two big gun cases the Supreme Court ruled on this term, each backing Second Amendment rights. Maddie Beertemple, News Nation, Washington.
We'll stay on the western side of the United States. California gas stations are being accused of using technology to inflate prices at the pump. A group of California drivers filed a lawsuit accusing some of the biggest names in the business of using AI to keep gas prices high. As News Nation's Nick Smith shows us, the lawsuit could become one of the first major tests of smart pricing as more industries lean on AI tools to set prices.
And this is just another example of how AI will play a role in our lives in every facet. The companies allegedly involved include BP, Marathon Petroleum, 7-Eleven, Walmart, Albertsons, Circle K, and other operators. The suit claims those companies use the same AI-driven tool from a company called Calibrate. That software analyzes competitor information and recommends prices at the pump. AAA shows California drivers are paying the highest price in the country today at $5.54 a gallon. That is higher than even Hawaii and Alaska. The drivers involved in the lawsuit claim when more stations relied on the same system, real competition began to disappear. Instead of one station cutting its prices to steal customers from the other station across the street, the lawsuit alleges the software helped prices move higher together. The complaint claims prices rose by as much as 30 cents a gallon in areas where the tool was widely used. It also says the defendants operate more than 1,700 California gas stations. But that is the plaintiff's case, and it's important to note that using the same software does not by itself prove the companies illegally agreed to fix prices.
Staying on the subject of AI, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe is responding to a group of Republican lawmakers who are asking him to call a special session this year to address concerns over data centers. Mark Zinn has the story from the Missouri State Capitol.
State Representative Don Mayhew sent this letter to Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe asking him to bring lawmakers back for a special session on data centers.
The legislature is frequently reactive, not proactive.
I caught up with the Republican lawmaker Wednesday morning in Rolla.
I think some clarification needs to be done, and the best way to do that is in a special session where we can put all the cards on the table.
He says Missourians can't wait until next year for the General Assembly to figure out a game plan.
The sooner we get moving on it, the better off we're going to be. Some of the things that have come up are a concern that I think we should be addressing right away.
The Republican from Pulaski County is running for state senate. Mayhew says the concerns over data centers have become one of the top issues voters are talking to him about.
Having the ability to do that doesn't necessarily mean you should do that. And where we're at with it is we want to make sure that these things, the cost of these things isn't being borne by the people of the state of Missouri.
In a statement, Governor Kehoe's office says in part that data center investments and concerns should be considered at the local level. However, the governor does not believe the state should interfere with local economic development efforts and the rights of individual landowners. And the governor's office adds that he looks forward to working with lawmakers on AI and data center legislation during their regular session next year. At the state capitol in Jefferson City, I'm Mark Zinn.
And a special hearing on those protections for people who live in Missouri is being held in Jefferson City September 16th of this year. Jeff Bernthal has more on the issues expected to be addressed and why some say the entire state needs the developments many communities oppose.
Hyperscale data centers sit on hundreds of acres. Two major projects in Montgomery County were recently approved over community objections.
And we found out that this thing has been in the works in our county for a lot of years, and it wasn't told. That's not the way you treat your neighbors and your friends.
Transparency concerns fueled Missouri State Representative Tricia Burns' desire to act. On Tuesday, she announced the House Speaker accepted her request for a House Intergovernmental Affairs Committee to convene in September.
Transparency, independent review, and proper decision making with safeguards should be done. We don't want to have any regrets.
Burns' legislative outline on issues she feels need to be addressed by the committee she will chair include defining key terms, requiring an independent feasibility study, prohibit non-disclosures, and require certain developer commitments, create noise and operational standards, require community notifications, create water permit requirements, and create an oversight body along with enforcement and penalties.
The more I talk to people, the more I realize that this really is an incredible scope of information that we have to sift through. I've heard from hydrogeologists, I heard from experts on EMFs, I've heard from folks in the ag community, and I'm sure I will hear from people from the tech side as well, and I welcome all of those conversations.
If we are to live with data centers, we need more regulations and more protection for the citizens.
We turn our attention now to the nation's capital, where last week true believers gathered demanding more transparency from the Pentagon when it comes to evidence of extraterrestrial life. News Nation's Hannah Brandt has more from Washington.
This UAP Disclosure Forum is all about a push for more transparency around UAP files. And because we're here in the halls of Congress, a lot of the focus at this event has been on what lawmakers can do to move this forward. At the forum, we heard a lot of the speakers say that they think progress has been made on this issue, with recent congressional hearings featuring whistleblowers and the Pentagon releasing 3 different tranches of UAP files. But the consensus among the speakers at the forum is there's more information that the government has, they say the American public deserves to see. And the lawmakers behind this push laid out some of the next steps on this effort. First, they say agencies like the CIA and the Department of Energy should be pushed to disclose more. Then, they say whistleblowers that want to come forward with information need protection to do so.
We are taking the information that we have received, we are handing it off, we are going to get them immunity and protection so that they can divulge that information, and let's see where it leads.
The people are very frustrated when they find that their government thinks that they should keep information from the people. And so that's why it's so important that we continue pressure, that we continue to do everything we can to dig up the truth and disclose it to the American people.
Both Luna and Burleson say they've seen what they call obstruction and stonewalling happening behind the scenes. And Senator Mike Rounds told me part of the challenge here is balancing some national security concerns with lawmakers' fight for more transparency. Though he tells me he thinks there is a way to strike that balance. And it's not just here in Congress that this issue is bipartisan. The group hosting this forum, the Disclosure Foundation, did a poll where they found an overwhelming majority of both Democrats and Republicans support the release of more UAP information. Nearly 90%, they say, among that small group that they surveyed. And the lawmakers I talked to say that's reflected in the conversations that they have with Americans. They're hearing a lot of interest in UAPs that does cross party lines. At the Capitol, Hannah Brand, News Nation.
Turning now to midterm elections, a big win for the progressive left in New York, where New York City's mayor Zohran Mamdani threw himself into closely watched congressional races. The election results are sending a message to the Democratic establishment and fueling a debate over the party's future ahead of midterms. News Nation Washington correspondent Margaret Chadbourne has more.
What a good evening it is.
A show of force from the progressive left in New York. Democratic Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani's handpicked congressional candidates scored a clean sweep over establishment-backed rivals. The results reinforce Mamdani's growing influence inside the Democratic Party and suggest voters are looking for a change.
We need a good neighbor. We need someone who will always have our back.
The victories also highlight divisions inside the party, mainly over Israel. All three winners condemned what they describe as genocide in Gaza, called for abolishing ICE, and pushed for higher taxes on the wealthy.
Democrats are painfully divided by our differences over the U.S. relationship to Israel and Palestine.
With control of Congress still at stake, Democratic leaders are trying to balance the energy of the progressive base with the need to win competitive swing districts. Republicans are using the victories in New York to argue that Democrats are led by socialists with extreme views.
This is the party of Zohran Mamdani, AOC, and Bernie Sanders. The issues that Bernie Sanders ran on in 2016 are the mainstream of the Democratic Party today. That's clear.
The primary outcomes could pose problems for House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, in line to become Speaker if Democrats reclaim control of the House. Several of the candidates endorsed by Jeffries and his leadership team lost to Mamdani's choices.
The path to 218 isn't through those districts that the mayor endorsed.
The big test ahead if the two competing sides of the Democratic Party can come together and take back Congress in November. Margaret Chadbourne, News Nation, Washington.
We'll stay in New York City, where federal investigators say the staff of a former mayor traded access to City Hall for cash. The charges were filed in federal court and have sent shockwaves throughout the nation. News Nation's Alicia Nieves has more.
This is a 13-count federal indictment of former Mayor Eric Adams' chief of staff, Frank Carone, and it basically alleges that former chief of staff traded access to City Hall and to federal funding in exchange for cash in his pocket. He was arrested and indicted along with three others, one of whom was his own brother. This all happening in the last 24 hours, where Frank Carone's home was raided by the FBI before he was taken into custody. In a press release, the first assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York said, quote, the defendant exploited the unprecedented migrant crisis in New York City for their own personal gain. Prosecutors say this former chief of staff received $120,000 in bribes in 2022 from the owner of a New York City hotel after helping that owner get a nearly $7 million contract to run the migrant shelter. And that was after the owner was initially denied that contract and the chief of staff then stepped in. The indictment, which has several photos of Carone and that hotel owner together, states the hotel owner then funneled the bribes through a bank account that was controlled by a law firm run by Carone's own brother. Carone and his lawyer denying all wrongdoing here.
And the reason why I'm saddened about what took place is this is a perfect example
of the government deciding on a target. They decided that Frank Carone was going to be a target, and they looked at every aspect of his life.
Carone's lawyer goes on to say that this was a Frankenstein indictment, barely pieced together at best and possibly even politically motivated, saying the DOJ was forced to drop charges against Mayor Eric Adams back in 2025, and now they're just trying to go after their next in line as revenge. Remember, Adams faced some similar charges here for bribery and wire fraud over allegations of lavish gifts that he received from Turkish officials, allegedly in return for political gain. After meeting, though, with President Trump back in 2025 and working with the White House on ICE efforts here in New York City, those charges were dismissed. Now, after being arrested, Frank Carone was let go on $2 million bond. He is pleading not guilty along with all of his other co-conspirators. I'm Alicia Nieves in New York City for News Nation.
Let's end this episode on a positive note. The next generation of America's Air and Space Forces have officially moved in at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Isabella Schoenman from our sister station in Colorado Springs shows us how the new class spent in-processing day.
The U.S. Air Force Academy's newest class is starting its journey to join either the Air Force or Space Force on In-Processing Day, or I-Day, saying goodbye to their families for this summer. Now, some basic cadets I spoke to said they're looking forward to joining something bigger and serving our country.
More than 1,130 appointees taking the oath to become basic cadets on Wednesday.
I'm a little nervous, but I'm also excited.
I'm blessed to be here.
After lots of emotional goodbyes.
Proud, but sad too. You lose one of your best friends.
I'm sad, but I'm really proud of her, and I know she's gonna do great.
The class quickly moving on to a much different way of life.
If you hear a lot of yelling, that is purposeful. The intention for that is to set them up for success, because this is going to be an extremely challenging experience.
Over the next 4 years, this class will experience the physical demands of rigorous military training, and one of the first steps was saying goodbye to their locks. Eva Ardioli traveled here from the East Coast to follow in her family's footsteps.
My grandfather was in the Air Force, and my whole family has been all about serving the community. So I kind of figured might as well get an education out of it too, and I ended up here.
Her goal is to reach for the stars.
Ever since I was 4, I've always wanted to be an astronaut.
Others aiming to be pilots in the Air Force.
I'm looking forward to being able to jump out of an airplane and have great academics.
Or fighter pilots.
I just really want to find a place to find the best version of myself.
And some are still exploring their options.
I'm really looking forward to the challenge that the Air Force Academy will bring.
Up next, 6 weeks of basic training.
These basics are going to be put to the ultimate test.
Then these classmates will be accepted into the cadet wing on August 5th. That will also be the next time they get to hug their families.
This class will be here for 47 months and is set to graduate in 2030. At the U.S. Air Force Academy, Isabel Schoenman, Fox 21 News.
And of course, we wish each of them nothing but the best of luck. That's going to do it for this episode. As always, thank you for going on the record with us.